Hello and welcome to Arnie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Merstone Mummy. The village of Merstone, nestled deep within the heart of the Isle of Wight, was the sort of place where nothing much happened. Cobblestone streets wound through rows of thatched cottages, and the village's mostly elderly folk and a scattering of families carried on with a pace of life that was as predictable as the tides. For Holly Arnold, a lifelong resident, this sleepy hamlet was a comfort. The comfort turned to chaos the day the mummy was unearthed. It began with an excavation at the edge of the village. A team of archaeologists had descended upon an overgrown field rumoured to hide ancient secrets. Holly, ever curious, had wandered down to the site one sunny morning. She was greeted by the sight of dust-covered workers meticulously brushing away layers of earth from a stone sarcophagus, its surface etched with hieroglyphs no one could decipher. "Isn't it fascinating?" said Dr. Edwin Clark, the excavation leader. "This could write history, a mummy." That night the village was abuzz with speculation. The local pub, the Weeping Willow, was packed with patrons whispering tales of curses and ancient evils. Holly's best friend, Maggie, laughed it off. "It's probably just some poor chap buried with a bit of flair," she said. But Holly couldn't shake the unease that prickled her skin. There was something about the way the air had felt at the excavation site, thick, oppressive, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The first death came 2 days later. Old Mr. Pritchard, the postmaster, was found in his home, his face frozen in a rictus of terror. The doctor attributed it to a heart attack, but whispers of the mummy's curse rippled through the village like wildfire. By the end of the week, 3 more villagers had succumbed, each under mysterious circumstances, each with that same look of horror etched onto their faces. Holly's unease turned to dread when Maggie became the 5th victim. They'd been chatting over tea when Maggie suddenly clutched her chest, her eyes widening in terror at something Holly couldn't see. She collapsed, lifeless, before Holly could even reach her. Grief-stricken and desperate for answers, Holly returned to the excavation site. It was abandoned now, the archaeologists having fled after the deaths began. The sarcophagus lay open, its lid askew, revealing a mummified figure wrapped in brittle linens. In the dim moonlight, Holly noticed symbols carved into the stone, the same symbols she'd seen etched on the walls of the old church in the village. Determined, she visited the church. Dustmotes danced in the beams of moonlight filtering through stained glass as she searched for clues. In a forgotten corner of the nave, she found an ancient book bound in cracked leather. Its pages detailed the story of a cursed priestess, buried alive for her crimes, her body sealed with a spell to ensure she would never rise again. But someone had disturbed her. Holly pieced it together. The archaeologist had unwittingly broken the seal, unleashing the priestess's wrath upon the village. The book hinted at a way to banish her spirit, but it required a ritual involving 3 sacred artifacts: a chalice, a dagger, and an amulet, all hidden somewhere on the island. The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and frantic searches. Holly combed through ancient ruins, braved crumbling caves, and deciphered cryptic maps. Each artifact came at a cost: a near drowning in a tidal cave, an encounter with shadowy figures that seemed to stalk her, and a gnawing fear that she was running out of time. Each night the body count in Merstone grew. Her search for the dagger led her to the cliffside ruins of Carisbrooke Castle. The castle, a labyrinth of crumbling stone and overgrown ivy, seemed alive with whispers. Holly's flashlight flickered as she descended into the damp undercroft. The air felt charged, and she could swear she heard faint footsteps behind her. She finally found the dagger lodged in the skeletal hand of a knight's effigy, but not before narrowly escaping a cave-in that left her gasping and covered in dust. The chalice was hidden in the crypt of a forgotten chapel near Ventnor. Holly descended into the dark, musty chamber, armed only with a lantern and her resolve. As she retrieved the artifact from an ancient altar, the sound of soft, shuffling steps echoed around her. The crypt's shadows seemed to coalesce into humanoid forms, their hollow eyes fixated on her. She fled, heart pounding, barely making it out before the heavy crypt door slammed shut behind her. The amulet proved the hardest to find. Clues led her to the Black Enchine, a place steeped in local legends of hauntings. The amusement park had long been abandoned, its rides rusting and creaking in the sea breeze. In the park's eerie silence, Holly discovered the amulet buried beneath the foundations of an old carousel. But the moment she unearthed it, the carousel began to turn on its own, the haunting melody of its music box echoing into the night. She ran, clutching the amulet tightly, as the shadows of painted horses seemed to gallop after her. With the artifacts finally in her possession, Holly prepared for the ritual. It had to be performed at the side of the sarcophagus under the light of the full moon. She enlisted the help of Father Bennett, the village priest, who was skeptical but agreed to assist. As they began the ritual, the air grew heavy. Shadows seemed to writhe and twist around them, and an unearthly wail echoed across the field. Holly's hand shook as she held the amulet aloft, chanting the incantation from the ancient book. The chalice and dagger gleamed ominously in the moonlight, their surfaces etched with glowing runes. The ground trembled, and the mummy's figure began to stir. Its eyes, black as obsidian, snapped open, and it let out a guttural scream that froze Holly's blood. But she didn't falter. She completed the chant, and with a blinding flash of light, the mummy collapsed into a pile of dust. But it wasn't over. The dust began to swell, coalescing into a spectral form. The priestess, her translucent face twisted with rage, loomed over them. Father Bennett stepped forward, reciting prayers in Latin, but the spirit's wails grew louder, drowning out his voice. Holly realized the final step of the ritual hadn't been completed. She grabbed the dagger and plunged it into the ground at the foot of the sarcophagus, anchoring the spirit. The chalice shattered in her other hand, spilling its contents onto the soil. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, the priestess disintegrated, her essence scattered to the winds. The curse was lifted, but Merstone would never be the same. The village mourned its dead, and the scars of that terrible month lingered in every whispered tale and wary glance. The excavation site was filled in, and the field grew wild once more, as if nature sought to bury the memory of what had transpired. As for Holly, she left the Isle of Wight, her once beloved home, now a place of haunting memories. But even as she tried to rebuild her life, she couldn't escape the feeling that some curses never truly end. Late at night, in the stillness of her new home, she would sometimes hear the faint strains of her carousel's haunting melody, as if the past refused to let her go. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.